Chapter 14. What to do when the higher intelligent will seems to be entirely overcome by the lower will and by the enemies. If you feel sometimes such a strong upsurging of sin that resistance to it will seem impossible, and the very zeal to oppose it will appear exhausted, take care, brother, not to give up the struggle, but rouse yourself and stand firm. It is a subterfuge of the enemy, who, with the thought that resistance is hopeless, strives to undermine your firm stand, and by making you lay down all your arms, to force you to surrender to him. Make your mind see the subterfuge of the enemy more clearly, and do not give ground. For so long as your will does not incline towards this passionate urge, you are still among the victors, the fighters, and the slayers of the enemy, even if your sympathy is already ranged on the side of the passion. Nothing and nobody can force your will or steal victory from your hands and overthrow you against your will, no matter how obdurate and bitter the war waged in you by the enemies of your salvation. God endowed our free will with such power that even if all a man's faculties, the whole world, and all the demons rose up in arms against him and attacked him, they could not compel it. It is always left free to desire what they offer or demand, if it so wishes, or not to desire it if it does not wish. On the other hand, for this very reason, his will bears the responsibility for everything and is subject to judgment. Remember this well. No matter how weak and exhausted you may feel, you cannot find excuses for inclining towards a passionate suggestion. Your conscience will tell you the same. So the stronger the attacks, the stronger the resistance you must prepare. And never abandon this resolve, repeating on all such occasions the words of command of one of our war leaders: "Watch ye, stand fast, quit ye like men, be strong." Thus keeping your will inflexible against an uprising of sin, and ranged on the side of the demands of the higher will, bring into action your spiritual weapons, one after another. The chief among them is prayer. Make it your inspiration, saying, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though a war should rise against me, in this I will be confident. I will not trust in my bow, neither shall my sword save me. In God we boast all the day long, and praise thy name forever. Neither fear ye their fear, nor be afraid. Sanctify the Lord of hosts himself, and let him be your fear, and let him be your dread, and he shall be for a sanctuary. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Take counsel together, and it shall come to naught. Speak the word, and it shall not stand, for God is with us." Thus inspired, do what a warrior in physical warfare does sometimes when he is hard pressed by the enemy. He steps back a little, to find a better point of vantage, and to see more clearly how to best speed his arrow at the heart of the foe. So you too collect your thoughts within, and re-establishing the consciousness and feeling of your nothingness, and of your impotence to achieve by yourself what this moment demands. Appeal to God, to whom all is possible, calling for his help against the attack of passion with warmth of trust and tears, saying, "Arise for our help, and redeem us for thy mercy's sake. Fight against them that fight against me. Take hold of the shield and buckler, and stand up for my help. Let them be confounded and put to shame that seek after my soul. Let them be turned back and be brought to confusion that devise my hurt. Holy Virgin, do not let me yield to the enemies and be vanquished by them. O my guardian angel, cover me with your wings against enemy arrows, and with your sword strike them down and cut them off from me." Persevere in these appeals, and help will soon come. At the same time, keep acute attention on yourself. The foe knows the power of such appeals to God, and hastens to forestall them, or spoil them by inciting senseless complaints against God for having allowed such enemy attacks and such danger of downfall to assail you. In this way, the enemy strives to prevent or stop your appeals to God and make you unworthy of God's help. As soon as you notice such an ungodly impulse, hasten to re-establish the true and sincere conviction that God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted, when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then examine carefully your preceding deeds, feelings, and thoughts, and you will find that it is they that gave birth to the inner storm, which put you in this dangerous position. The enemy defamed God and covered up your own shortcomings. By faith you must justify God in yourself, and by reasoning, cast off the flattering veil with which the enemy has covered you. You must shed the load of inattention and self-indulgence, repent, and confess your inner sin to God, and return to the appeals we have indicated, which bring back God's help, since he is ever ready to come to your assistance, especially on such occasions. After this, when the inner storm has died down, the struggle should proceed in accordance with the general rules of unseen warfare, which have been mentioned in part already. Chapter 15. War should be waged ceaselessly and courageously. If you want to gain a speedy and easy victory over your enemies, brother, you must wage ceaseless and courageous war against all passions, especially and preeminently against self-love, or a foolish attachment to yourself, manifested in self-indulgence and self-pity. For it is the basis and source of all passions, and cannot be tamed except by constant voluntary self-inflicted sufferings, and by welcoming afflictions, privations, calumnies, persecutions by the world and by men of the world. Failure to see the need of this pitiless attitude to yourself has always been, is, and will be the cause of our failure to achieve spiritual victories, and of their difficulty, rarity, imperfection, and insecurity. So this spiritual warfare of ours must be constant and never ceasing, and should be conducted with alertness and courage in the soul. They can easily be attained if you seek these gifts from God. So advance into battle without hesitation. Should you be visited by the troubling thought of hatred and undying malice, which the demons harbor against you, and of the innumerable hosts of the demons, think on the other hand of the infinitely greater power of God and his love for you, as well as the incomparably greater hosts of heavenly angels and the prayers of the saints. They all fight secretly for us and with us against our enemies, as it is written, "The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." How many weak women and small children were incited to fight by the thought of this powerful and ever-ready help? And they got the upper hand and gained victory over all the wisdom of the world, and all the wiles of the devil, and all the malice of hell. So you must never be afraid, if you are troubled by a flood of thoughts, that the enemy is too strong against you, that his attacks are never ending, that the war will last for your lifetime, and that you cannot avoid incessant downfalls of all kinds. Know that our enemies, with all their wiles, are in the hands of our divine commander, our Lord Jesus Christ, for whose honor and glory you are waging war. Since he himself leads you into battle, he will certainly not suffer your enemies to use violence against you and overcome you, if you do not yourself cross over to their side with your will. He will himself fight for you, and will deliver your enemies into your hands, when he wills and as he wills, as it is written, "The Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp, to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee." If the Lord delays in granting you full victory over your enemies, and puts it off until the last day of your life, you must know that he does this for your own good, so long as you do not retreat or cease to struggle wholeheartedly. Even if you are wounded in battle, do not lay down your arms and turn to flight. Keep only one thing in your mind and intention, to fight with all courage and ardor, since it is unavoidable. No man can escape this warfare, either in life or in death. And he who does not fight to overcome his passions and his enemies will inevitably be taken prisoner, either here or yonder, and delivered to death. It is not without profit to bear in mind also the purpose for which God is pleased to leave us in this state of war. This purpose is the following. In the days of old, when God led Israel into the promised land, he did not order them to destroy all the peoples dwelling there, but he left 5 tribes alien and hostile to Israel. First, to prove the chosen people, and to see how firmly they believed in him and faithfully kept his commandments, and secondly, to teach his people the art of warfare. In the same way, he does not destroy all our passions at once, but leaves them in us, letting them fight against us till our very death, just for the same purpose, namely, to prove our love for him and our obedience to his will, and to train us in the spiritual warfare. The Blessed Theodorite speaks of this in greater detail. God, he says, does this for the following ends. First, to prevent us falling into carelessness and negligence, and to make us watchful, diligent, and attentive. Second, to remind us that the enemy is ever ready to attack us, lest we unexpectedly find ourselves surrounded by the enemy and overcome by passions. Third, that we should always have recourse to God, asking and hoping for his help. Fourth, so that we should not be proud, but should think humbly of ourselves. Fifth, so that we should learn to hate with our whole heart the passions and enemies who so tirelessly attack us. Sixth, to prove whether we keep to the end God's honor, love, and faith. Seventh, to urge us to a more strict observance of God's commandments, so that we do not overlook the least of them. Eighth, to learn from experience the great value of virtue, and so never to consent to abandon it and fall into sin. Ninth, in order that constant warfare should give us the possibility to gain greater and greater crowns. 10th, that we should glorify God and shame the devil by our patience to the end. And finally, that we should get accustomed to warfare during our life, and so not fear it during the hour of death, when we are to be subjected to the hardest of all attacks. Thus, since we are always surrounded by so many enemies, whose hatred of us is so bitter, we can expect no peace or respite from them, no cessation or postponement of attacks, but must be ready for an onslaught at any moment, and when it comes, must immediately engage with the enemy with courage. Naturally, it would have been better if we had not originally opened the doors of our being and let the enemies and passions enter our heart and soul. But since they have already found their way into us, we cannot afford to be negligent, but must arm ourselves against them to drive them out of us. They are shameless and stubborn, and will not leave unless driven out by force.